we use Tally for every one of our clients.
So how many tax returns do you guys do in a typical year?
I think we did 500 this year.
Before there is this Tally 4, how did you guys handle this?
Yeah, before it was super messy. We did not have, as we've grown a lot over the past 4 years. So like our work paper standardization needed some help, which Tally 4 has definitely helped out a lot with because it forces everything into one standard work paper that we then use as the work papers. But before we were just using Excel. We were just using QBO and we would export, the 2 years of P&L, the 2 years of balance sheet. That was what we would use for our work papers. I don't know. It probably saves at least an hour per return. And then just for tax prep, and if we're doing tax projections for clients and we actually need to get the K1, like get an idea of what the K1 is going to look like, then we also use it for the projections.
Yeah, well, that's huge too. Some of the bullets under the Tax Hero section of Tally 4: automate your book to tax, deliver tax returns faster, minimize extensions, reduce staff turnover, focus on tax strategy, right? Tell us what that means to you, Shane.
The more time we spend on moving one expense, or like aggregating 10 expenses into the legal line or into the accounting line or into the other deductions, like that's just a waste of time, frankly. So Tally 4 really cuts down on the administrative preparer's job of aggregating various general ledger items into one line on a tax return so that we can focus more on how much can we put into your 401k this year? Like, what is the R&D tax credit going to look like? How much cash do we just need to have on hand on March 15th and April 15th of 2023 or next year, whatever, so that our clients, who we all have like a deeper relationship with, can decide on whether or not how much house they can afford, or if they're going to bring on a new business partner, things that actually add more value.
So check out Tally 4 today. Book to tax in minutes, not hours, because tax work should be easier, faster, and way more fun. File a tax return in 10 minutes with Tally 4. Check it out. Tally4.com. TALLYFOR.com. Peace out, homies.
I've just wasted my time because I've read the email. I'm out hanging with the kids. I'm at the playground or whatever. I'm not going to take care of whatever that thing is probably right then and there anyway. Drag on the mind. Maybe now it's creating some anxiety because maybe there's an issue and I've got to go, I know like, oh man, I really want to get back to this person on this thing. So now I've not only have like, I can't do anything about it, but like I've made myself anxious about it. But then even if it's not one of those things, I'm going to end up doing is I'm going to end up rereading it again come Monday morning when I'm going back to the inbox or
May I have your attention, please?
Greetings, Accounting High. Alex Miles here, and these are your morning announcements. Did you go to school and study for your credentials? Well, according to Scott, he was born with his unique credentials, and in this episode, he shares with us what exactly those are. Join us for a fun conversation with Damien Martin as he shares a bit about his non-traditional way of getting into tax and how time is both precious and fast, which is why it is so important to be intentional with the people in our lives. We all know how much Scott despises emails and notifications, so in honor of this discussion today, sit back, relax, put your phone away, and open your mind because class is in session.
I repeat, may I have your attention, please?
This is another public service announcement brought to you in part
by Accounting High.
The views and events expressed here are
of the next generation of accounting and tech professionals leading this space.
The events and suggestions are not to be taken lightly. Children should not partake in the listening
of this podcast.
Anything else?
yeah.
So without further ado, introducing the star of our show,
Scott Scarano and Damien Martin.
we're going to have a problem here.
We got a very special guest today, Damien Martin of Simply Tax. I hope that all of our listeners know who you are.
I appreciate that. I'm happy to be here, man.
I'm happy that you're here. So we are currently live in person. I haven't done too many live podcasts, and every time I do, I don't ever look the person in the eye when I'm talking because I'm looking at the mic.
You also got a nice window, view here. You can look out the window too,
We're in Las Vegas.
Yeah.
We're at CPA Engage. Tell me a little bit about why you're here.
Well, a couple of reasons, I guess. I mean, the technical content, all that stuff, but the networking is probably a large part of it. Got a lot from our group here in our firm and building the team and spending time with them. So kind of multi-front, There's just a lot of great people that you run into. Actually, it's the first time I've been to Engage. I've kind of a long time like wanting to come, but just never made it work. And so here we are.
So how long have you been, actually, just tell me, how did you get into this? How did you get into tax, CPA-dom, accounting?
Yeah. I did not take the straight route. I kind of went around this way and kind of came back. So I actually, like our good friend Blake Oliver, who introduced us here. So I actually studied music as well. I was not performance, so he was arguably cooler than me. Plus, he plays the cello. So that definitely makes him cooler.
Definitely
than me.
got the ladies with the cello.
Yeah. I played the violin for a while. It's just not the same. It doesn't have that same.
But the violin's beautiful. Ron Baker spoke about the violin on 3 different occasions during our episode with him. Just the wood and the structure and everything that it takes to make it isn't what makes a violin.
Yeah. I actually listened to that episode.
Oh yeah,
at least one of the episodes.
Yeah.
That was a very good episode. Well, Ron Baker,
Yeah.
and then you did a great job interviewing him.
He's amazing.
That was just a great concept, right? That you can't. You can weigh a violin, but that doesn't give you the art behind it. There's something else there that's not present just in you take the parts apart. It's the sum of the parts that create something.
It's the sum of the parts, but then also the human inputs.
Exactly.
And I think that goes without saying that in tax and accounting, there's also an art to it sometimes. Sometimes there is an art to tax. It's not that simple.
Yeah, that is true. The name is a little bit of a misnomer in some ways. I like to simplify tax. That's kind of what I like to do, but it's admittedly not simple, But that's the part that drew me in.
Sure.
So, I guess, all right. So I was on the road going music route, and I was interested in business along the way, and I was setting out to
got to
double
make
major.
money. If you're not going to be a professional like Yo Ma,
right. It's
he's not
a little
violin
hard.
though. Yeah.
He's cello, but it's fine. Well, and I wasn't. Piano was my main instrument. It still is my main instrument. I don't play as much as I used to, but
Ooh,
yeah.
My son just started playing piano.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Awesome. And your son, remind me, how old's your son?
He's 8 years old.
8 years old.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Yeah.
And you have 2 7-year-olds.
I have 2 7-year-olds, and we're starting down that road. I'm learning, and I've always heard this, and I was probably this way when I was 7 or 8. That you don't listen to your parents the way that you maybe do somebody else. So we're starting down that road of teaching them. I was going to teach them, and they're just not as engaged as when we have somebody else doing it. So
it's so true.
Yeah.
It's so true. Well, it's true to a degree, but they have to make it their own choice, right? They have to find the love for something, and then if you love it too, that's amazing. That's great. But if it's forced upon them, they may not go back to it until later in life. If it's something that they're meant to be doing, or if it's
right, yeah. So piano and business along the way, but it just there was an element to just understanding. I did the accounting stuff, and it just made sense, and so I kind of started down that road. Did an internship, an accounting firm. Liked it. It just came naturally. So then I just kind of followed that path, and that's led me down the tax road. I was really more audit out of the gate than I was tax.
Oh, interesting.
I will say.
Okay.
But then
a lot of us kind of started that way. I did too. Not a lot, but so you grew up California?
Northern California.
Northern California. Awesome. Yeah. And where'd you go to school?
I went to UC Berkeley, undergrad.
Berkeley?
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Awesome.
So it's a great campus, great area,
And did you go there for music, or did you go for business?
No, I went for music.
Oh, awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I finished out in music too. Probably about halfway through somewhere in there, I decided, I think I'm going to give this accounting thing a try. And that's when I had that internship in there. It was through a family friend that kind of got me connected in there. And I went to a career fair event, and this was actually pretty impactful. This was kind of one of those like moments. It was like sliding door moment almost of like just okay, that makes a lot of sense. So I was going to double. It was going to take me probably 5.5 years to do that. I went to this this event, and she was at tax. I don't know what level she was at one of the big four, and she said, well, no, I was a bioengineering major.
Oh, okay.
And so what you should just do if you think you want to do tax, just finish up the music, get it done in 4 years, and then go and do the master's immediately after, or make sure you get enough units and whatnot to sit for the exam. And that's what I did. And so in the same amount of time, I effectively came out with a master's in tax as well. So it was pretty impactful. It kind of got me down there.
An interesting juxtaposition, but it doesn't surprise me, because I think some of the best that are doing things outside of just the profession outside of just accounting and tax. You're doing a podcast. Blake does a podcast. I do a podcast. Like, there are people that have a large amount of creativity in them that has to come out in one way or another.
Sure.
And when you find that outlet, you can really have some kind of balance in life. I'm learning that firsthand over the past year. I've always, stifled it. Mm-hmm. It's interesting to hear that juxtaposition in you immediately. It wasn't like you went or did you try to professionally do music first? Or?
I didn't. No.
Okay.
No, actually, it was kind of a very interesting moment. I can remember lining up in graduation. So, I mean, Cal's a big campus, right? There's lots of people there. The music department is a kind of a smaller group within the the large. So it was actually our graduation was great. I mean, it was. I forget how many were in the class. We'll say 50 were in the graduating class, right? But I can remember we kind of lining up and just chatting and say, hey, what do you so what are you doing next year? What are you doing after this? And by and large, so I was on the academic route, right? I was at aspirations to be a music professor. When I started on that journey, I said, all right, go on, get the master's, get the PhD so you can teach. And not obviously you don't have to have the PhD to teach, but that certainly helps if you're going to make your career that way. And so a majority were maybe taking a year off and then going to go do the master's, or maybe take a year off, have no idea what they're going to do. And then I was sharing that, I was like, Damien, what are you doing? Well, on Monday, I start full-time at the CPA firm that I'm working for. So it was a very different. So I mean, I was already lined up. I was already dialed in and already had the job. So.
Yeah. And again, you got to do something safe too. And it's, it definitely sounds like you enjoy what you're doing now. You can hear that and see that in people. You can also see the alternatives.
Yeah.
By the way, Accounting High is looking for faculty right now. And we're going to have a music department.
Okay.
And I don't know how that's going to play out. It was going to be kind of like a radio show in the middle, but maybe we can make it technical a little bit too. Maybe we can have you be an adjunct professor.
There you go. You got to get the music teaching.
Well, we're going to have PE.
That, Okay.
We're going to teach health for accountants. Just how to live healthier lifestyles. We're going to talk about healthy eating or living and all that. We're going to have book reports. We're probably going to have sex ed too. So that's there's a whole nother topic. I may end up going into a bit of a vice accounting cycle and change the niche of my firm. Might end up gearing it up toward OnlyFans creators and others like that. So I don't know. I throw those things in there, but it's all along the metaphor of a high school. So
there you go.
We're gonna have to put together a faculty list and a yearbook of all the guests and everything. That's soon to come.
Okay.
Probably by 2023. So
that's soon these days.
It is, isn't it? We're already in June.
It's telling me it's crazy. It's cliche, and I always say I feel like what is it like talking about how fast time goes into the weather is like the cliche things out, but that's I can't help myself.
It's not cliche. I love the cliche stuff, and primarily because you can definitely say that now, but you couldn't say that during COVID.
No,
COVID went by like 5 years.
Yeah,
it felt, and it wasn't that time felt slow during it, because it did feel like things were going pretty fast. Everything was happening fast around us, but I felt like we were moving in slow motion.
Yeah.
I'm
right
was
there with you.
A crazy perception of time when you don't have a routine or you're changing your routine and there's a lot of change around you. Your perception of time changes, and I'd love to explore that more. But I'm glad you pointed out the obvious, but it's not or the cliche.
And you kind of have to be aware of it too, right? I mean, it helps to be aware of that. That's something I've probably been reflecting on quite a bit lately. Is just being more intentional, more deliberate, and it is passing faster. So I need to be smarter with what I'm doing with my time. I need to make sure I'm doing the things that are important to me. Spending the time with the twins at home. Again, personal, professional. It's all I look at it as kind of all one big. It all mixes together, and you got to figure it out and how it plays nicely with each other. And but yeah, if you're not intentional, man, the days fly out the calendar, and
the work's going to fill up too much of your time if you're not intentional about cutting it off. I remember I used to work 60, 80 hours a week just because I felt like everything needed to get done, and I kept reaching for something else. And you know what though? I want to talk about that, like enjoying time with your family, enjoying time with your kids. I'm kind of focused on the next thing, or my mind is thinking about the podcast now. It's not the office, it's not work. I'm thinking about what I'm going to do on the podcast, and I can never really be present with the family because I always got something else I want to do or record or whatever it is. I'm fired up about that, but I want to be more intentional. And I think that's the way I was able to find the balance. Obviously, it's not for everybody. Everybody's different, but I was able to find that whole, what everybody talks about, work-life balance, which I think is kind of, I'm kind of agreeing with Ron Baker there. Like there's, like you said,
it's integrated.
You got to integrate all of it.
It's integrated. Yeah.
And there's never going to be a balance if you're passionate about both.
Right. Yeah. And maybe I think it's a little bit of and that's where the intentionality and then just pausing to think. And I think, honestly, the pandemic experience, I think, has been helpful in that regard, because you do kind of have to, it maybe slow down a little bit. Felt like it was moving in slow motion, but, gave me an opportunity to say, okay, every day I'm going to think about what did I spend my time on yesterday? What do I want to tweak about that, right?
Ooh, you're doing your own little after-action reviews and stuff.
Yeah, and mostly because I'm not great at it. It's a work in progress, right?
Yeah.
Honestly, I've got this is my latest. I go through various versions of this. Like I've bounced around it probably for my whole professional.
Sure.
Like probably even in school too. I did the same thing where it's like, all right, this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to schedule it all out, and then I get a fraction of it done.
So I started a new little habit tracker and journal.
Nice.
And I'm even trying new productivity methods.
Okay.
I'm trying to go with just 6 things a day. And right now I can't even get to 6.
Yeah.
Not even get 6 done, but sometimes I can't even think of the 6 things I want to do that day. But you kind of have to. You kind of have to be very intentional about what you're going to do. Otherwise, you're just going to be reacting to everything that comes up.
Right. You're right. And I think that's the challenge is there's something, I think there's a value that I got going through it. And it's still, because you're serving clients, you're serving those that you work with, right? And being on the team, and you want to be there for them. And so you have to be careful about going too far that way, but not getting the other stuff done. But habit tracking, man, that's where it's at for me. The light bulb moment there was I get Apple Watch, and it's amazing to me how much I get driven by hey, I got to get my,
filling the rings.
I got to close my ring, man. I'm going to go walk around the room a couple times, so I got to try and close my ring, or I'm going to stand up.
I've been doing jumping jacks and we talked about this yesterday.
About that. That's right. Yeah.
So and that's why I've been doing it, because I got to fill my ring, and I felt like I cheated for a while. So I got the Apple Watch real early days, and it was at 12, and I was able to do 12 when I wasn't working from home, or if I wasn't working that much. Like when I got away from the business and let the business kind of run itself, I was kind of standing. But now I'm sitting doing editing and other things like that. I do kind of have to stand up once every hour, and I've been doing jumping jacks and push-ups each time. So I'm knocking out 2 habits at once, right?
Yeah.
The push-ups is one of the habits, and the standing every hour. And then, we can go into all habits too.
That's some habit stacking right there.
Habit stacking.
Yeah.
So have you read Atomic Habits?
I have. That's a fantastic book, man. I've read it at least twice.
Yeah. I just read it the 3rd time.
It's really, it's gold. Yeah. And recognize
the Clear Habit Journal.
Yeah.
I got the, so our first set of book reports is on Atomic Habits. We go through books that are significant and foundational to life and the profession. You could always tie things back into ways to live and run your own modern firm, because we tend to always focus on the meat of the technical,
right.
And I don't think you do that. Not on your podcast. You talk about everything. I mean, you got to keep it real, and you have to be able to balance both. Go back again with that balance, but it's I think there's an art to being able to relate all of it to life, as we're talking about finding that whole, work-life intentionality, not just balance.
Yeah. And I've also been reflecting on it too. I think you break a great point there about kind of foundation. I can't even talk today. Foundational items, because I think a lot of times, especially here's what I've been thinking about it with some, people coming on the team, coming out of school. How am I going to help them? This is a thing that gets me out of bed a lot of days too. Is just trying to, hey, I've got this team. How am I going to make them fulfill whatever it is for them that they want to do, right? And try to make that align with what we're trying to do, right? But I think sometimes we get so focused on the meat that we don't focus on the fundamentals.
Yeah.
And and it's easy to forget. I mean, and again, I'm sharing this only because I've made the mistake of it's kind of like when I was at Cal. I took a stats 101 class.
Yeah.
And the professor was brilliant. I mean, he I don't know, well published, well known, knew his stuff, and it was almost like he was too far beyond. So it was hard for me because I couldn't, like, the fundamentals weren't there. I'm like, okay, I know we're getting all this great grandiose stuff over here, but like I don't have the basics down. And I think sometimes we can do that. And I know I've done that with new people, and you just forget, like, I mean, they don't even know how to show up to an office or work from home or wherever. They don't know how to. They've never had a full-time job oftentimes, right? So it's
even if they have had a full-time job, this past couple of years, they've shifted how they've worked.
Exactly.
I had to go back to fundamentals for how we interacted. I had to get everybody out of email. We can't be emailing each other. I even tried to get everybody out of Slack. That was pretty difficult, and it wasn't very successful. But we implemented, because we went fully virtual last year permanently. I mean, we did tip of COVID and then just never went back to the office. We implemented things like office hours.
Yeah.
They are very intentional about how they're interacting with each other, and they're not just pinging each other back and forth. So another foundational book for me was Cal Newport's recent one, A World Without Email. That's
on my list. I've read his what's the other book now? I'm forgetting the name of it.
So Good They Can't Ignore You.
He's got a number of them.
Deep Work is the big one.
Yeah. And that's I feel like that's like my,
that's another foundational one.
It is. But I haven't read The World Without Emails yet. So
that one's great. You'll enjoy it when you do. I'd love to hear what you think.
What's your strategy? How did you get out of email?
Yeah. That's a good point. So first it was laying down some groundwork and foundations of how we're interacting with each other, how we're communicating, and Carbon plays a pretty big part in that, because then we don't have to email each other. We can keep everything intentional. The office hours was a big one.
Yeah.
We've implemented EOS over the past 5 years. So that also helped us become intentional with our meeting cadence and everybody kind of keeping in sync, keeping on the same page. Also just keeping everybody, trying to keep it fun still too. And I don't think I'm doing that very well right now. I think it's almost like, your employees are like your kids in some ways too. And I haven't been paying enough attention to them. I've been paying attention to this podcast. I've been trying to get out of the work. So I want to go back and bring the fun back to work, because we used to have a lot of fun when we were in the office. We used to, Fridays basically didn't work at all. There was nothing ever scheduled. It was always like, tidy up whatever you need to do from the week. And then half of the day we would just order food, watch Game of Thrones or watch something and just kind of hang out.
Yeah.
So
no, well, and it is interesting talking about being intentional.
Yeah,
and I love the pun of, like, bringing the fun back to fundamentals or something. I don't know. It's sitting there. I can't let that sit. I didn't execute it well, but I had to
that
throw
might
it
be
in
the title of this episode.
Bringing the fun to fundamentals. There you go. But yeah, man, I like just going through the experience. So we even had some new hires that had never worked, so came in a completely remote environment, and we were trying. But like, how do you build that connection? And it takes, you've got to be more intentional about it. And I think that that's kind of how I'm thinking about it too, where it's like, well, what am I doing that's not making it the fun, or not making it, creating the right environment so that you can show up your best and do your best. Like, it's hard work, but it's rewarding work.
It's always hard to figure out what you're not doing. You can always look at what you're doing and implement and change that, or be more intentional about stop doing what you're doing. But it's kind of like Atomic Habits. You've got to make certain things invisible. There's certain ways to stop bad habits, and there's certain ways to bring on good habits. It's like there's certain things that are so elusive that you're not doing at all, that, how do you find out what to start doing again?
So you got a lot of balls in there, man. I got to tell you, you're a podcaster, you're thinking about the email, and there's probably something there that maybe that's why you and I are kind of, we get to talking, and we're like, yeah, there's a lot of similarities here. I tend to get a lot of balls in the air, especially when I get really busy. That's when I tend to throw more of them in the air, and I'm like, I got to write them down and come back to them instead of just trying to get them all going at once, I don't
know if you can see too, I've got about 6 notebooks around here because I just have to jot things down. I'm trying to be a lot more intentional about not using my phone and iPad and even computer.
Right.
I'm very disconnected.
I respect it a lot.
It's the clarity of mind when you're not watching the news, when you're not checking your phone, when you don't have alerts. Like, that was one thing that we did at the office too. I told everybody to turn their notifications off. They don't get notified for email or Slack or anything, and I don't want them to. I bet you a lot of them still do have their notifications on, but that was more of a heavy suggestion, strong suggestion to turn it off. But yeah, not getting notified And not having those context shifts makes a world of a difference.
Yeah, well, we can go down the firm route here in a second, but I
Got a lot of roads to go down.
we got a lot of roads to go down here, but like I'll credit my wife for this, because I had notifications on my phone, like outside of even email and and all of that. I mean, literally had news and all that. And my wife's like, you turn it all off, and I fought it for the longest time.
You have to. Yeah.
She's 100% right. I mean, I turned it all off, and I don't miss it. Like I did go through. It was almost like this withdrawal, period where I'm like, holy cow, like I got to know, like I'm missing something. But you know what? I figure it out eventually, and it's the clarity of not having to like jump, have my mind jump in 5 different directions at the same time. It's great. And then the other habit that I've learned too, that's kind of on the email side, and actually I don't know where I originally, who told me this originally, but there was I started implementing this on like Sundays, for example, right? I would always kind of have this like, okay, I turned off the notifications, the number, so I wouldn't see that there's new emails
Getting
coming
bubbles
in.
out. Yeah.
But I would still I would find myself just going in and checking, just, hey, did I get anything? Did I get anything? And here's the genius in this is say, okay, well, if I'm not actually going to sit down and do anything about it, I've just wasted my time because I've read the email. And one of two things
I'm going to mark it as unread.
I got to go back and mark it as unread. But one of two things happen. One, if I'm I'm out hanging with the kids, I'm not gonna we're at the playground or whatever, right? Like I'm not gonna take care of whatever that thing is probably right then and there anyway, right? So now it's drag on the mind. Maybe now it's creating some anxiety because maybe there's an issue and I've got to go. I know like, oh man, I really want to get back to this person on this thing. So now I've not only I can't do anything about it, but like I've created, I've made myself anxious about it. But then even if it's not one of those things, I'm going to end up doing is I'm going to end up rereading it again come Monday morning when I'm going back to the inbox or at a time. So basically what I try to do is I don't really want, unless, again, you look for fires and sometimes there's a need to look for fires and make sure there's no fires, right? But I really try to not read an email unless I'm actually going to sit down and do something about it.
There's never any fires.
There's
never any fires that need a emergency alert.
Yeah.
And I'm not going to say never. Maybe there is, but the only real fire is the one that's going on in your head.
Yeah.
And the anxiety that we create.
Yeah.
And that ends
it's totally self-induced.
Yeah. And that's really cool that you're talking about that. You went through that because I did too. And another shout out to Cal Newport. Digital Minimalism is a book that I read that helped me get on the other side of that. And it was hard.
Yeah.
This happened during COVID too, where the notification thing was not easy. Now I'm totally liberated from it all. And I notice now the things that my mind is taking me to. Whenever I pick up my phone, it's always now 3 apps. It's always my messages. I don't ever open email on my phone. It's like, it's there, but I don't ever even go into it.
Okay. Yeah.
It's messages, it's Twitter and LinkedIn.
Yeah.
And I find that the Twitter and the LinkedIn one, I'm not really doing anything. The messages, if there's no messages, I'm not going to just keep scrolling and looking at old messages or looking at other things.
Yeah.
If there's nothing there, there's nothing there. And I only see the messages inside of it. It's only the blue bubble next to the message to know that there's a new one.
Right.
I don't even see it outside of going into it, but I go into it.
Yeah, yeah. You find yourself just going there, like, or have you broken the habit habitually, where you start?
Well, nobody's telling me to, but if there's a lull in life, like I'm waiting for an elevator or I'm waiting for something to happen, I'll just like feel that my phone's in my pocket and then I'll grab it. And the first thing I always do when I go to my phone now actually is go to the music. And I put the music on because I go on a lot of walks. But after that, sometimes even on my walk, if my mind wanders, I'll go to the messages. Yeah.
Yeah. Interesting.
It's, so yeah, it's part, it's a lot of it is our minds get rewired. Our brain get pickled by everything, everything that's kind of like it's so hard. It is a withdrawal system. And speaking of withdrawal, I went through that last year too. Like I cut a lot of things out last year. We sold the office. We had to let go 2 employees. I stopped my notifications and everything like that. And then I stopped taking Klonopin. I stopped taking the anti-anxiety medicine that I was taking for 15 years. So withdrawal is a real thing on both the digital and physical.
Yeah.
The digital withdrawal is almost the same in a lot of ways. Like the lack of sleep and the things that you go through and the way that your body reacts to. It's kind of weird, but anything is just a physical manifestation of however pickled our brains were from that, addiction, whatever it is. And we can be addicted to a lot of things.
Yeah. And it's interesting because you talk about managing, because self-care is that's probably there's a lot of things, which is funny because I was hearing, and I can't remember where it was from. I tend to I love to learn about new things and just collect information about things. And so oftentimes I can't remember where I got it from, or it'll take me a little bit, but it was talking about maybe it was, I don't know, but like priorities, the fact that like we say we have priorities, which kind of it's an odd thing because there's only, how can you have more than one priority?
Yeah.
You can only have a priority.
It's like people saying they can multitask.
Right. You really can't. And honestly, I was a big believer that you can. And and there's still something like deep down that tells me I should be able to do that. And
I think we grew up people telling us that we could, and it was a common term. And I think that's going to have to shift. You got to have a mindset shift around that, because you can only do two things, and one of them could be autopilot, like doing the dishes or not even driving. But sometimes you know where you're going and you don't need the directions, so you can just get there without thinking, and then you can have a conversation. But you can't have a conversation with somebody and look at your phone,
right?
And have the TV on, or even music. It's something has to be in the background on autopilot.
Yeah, and I think I learned that too in two ways. Where it was really clear to me all of a sudden. Where it's like with the kids at home, and if I had the phone on the other hand, I'm not really present. I'm not really engaged in what they're telling me. And well, right? Having an 8-year-old, I mean, they ask a lot of questions. They want to talk, and they'll tell you about anything and everything. And sometimes it's like, all right, get to the point, man. But like I love it, and I'm like trying to eat all up as much as I can. But then if I've got the phone and I'm looking at the news or Twitter or whatever, man, my brain's over there, and I'm actually not listening to them.
You're not multitasking. It looks like you're listening. You're nodding your head, and then you repeat the last thing that they said, but you don't get the essence of what they're trying to tell you.
Exactly, and you miss it. And then I think the other thing where it became clear, because there was this like immediate, like, I don't say tendency, but just I'm going to multitask like during the pandemic, like out of the gate, because everything's now Zoom. And you're,
oh God,
and so you're like doing, I've got all these windows up, and I've got notes, and I'm like, and I realized I'm not present enough. So like, I'm actually incredibly more inefficient, because I have to go back and remember, or like reread something, or re-listen, or like ask somebody again, because I wasn't fully there. And so that's taken a lot of effort. Again, I feel like I still sometimes, like, it's like you're going skiing, and then you got the fresh powder versus like you already have the tracks, and so like my mind just goes right back to the tracks. So like if I'm not careful, I go right back to that habit, no problem. And so I've just, it takes just being intentional,
Yeah. So I said this on the last episode that I released. A lot of people have a lot of credentials behind their names, and I was born with a lot of mine. ADHD. OCD. Like I don't have my CPA. I do have my EA, but a lot of the letters I got weren't earned. They were just handed down to me. I mean, I don't know. I don't know how all that is to a degree. It wasn't like when I was young, I was labeled as ADHD. My brother was. I wasn't. But now that's a real thing for a lot of people with everything going on. The distractions are almost to the point where everybody might feel like they have that. I don't know if I wasn't labeled it when I was younger, and maybe I developed it, or who knows what it is, but I definitely find that I can't even do one thing at a time if I'm not taking my meds. Right before we started recording, I had to take my medicine. I think of just about a half hour, it's about kicked in, and I'm more focused, I'm more alert, I'm more alive.
Yeah.
I can react, but I didn't want that to be a dependency on a medication, right? So that's why I stopped taking last year. I didn't want to have to live my life dependent on something, but then I realized it enhances my life. It makes me a better person. It makes me better at being intentional. Right. I can be intentional. I can't be intentional if I'm not taking it, because I really don't have any idea what I should do,
right.
Or what I should intend to do. And I can't even think. Like, my mind is foggy, like real foggy. And the fog could be that I just went and ate an really big egg sandwich, and maybe that could be fogging my mind a little bit. Maybe it was the drinking last night. Maybe it was other things, but
there's a lot of things. And I think that's the hard part, again, when you get so just distracted, or you allow everything to kind of fill in with all the distractions that life has. I mean, there's just so much coming at us anymore, right? And you know, it's like Cal Newport's point, right? And just our brains aren't wired that way. And, you know, you can sometimes think it's something else. And I'll share this because, and honestly, I haven't, and I shared this with you, and I haven't shared it very, you know, widely.
How many episodes have you done of your podcast?
We're north of 150.
In 150 episodes, you've only done one of mine, and now you're going to share something for the first time. This is great and exclusive for Accounting High.
Yeah. But and maybe because the fact that you just share that you've earned the credential of ADHD, right? Like, so I figured this out probably about 4 or 5 years ago that I have ADHD as well.
Yeah.
I had a good buddy of mine that he was basically like, hey, I figured this out about myself, and I think, you know, just explore it. And I immediately was like, there's no way. Like,
sure.
Like, I mean,
we're too strong for that.
We're too strong for that. Like, you can't have something wrong with you. And
we're high performers.
And ADHD can be a great thing. Like, and I think if you're channeling it the right way, but it can just be like an unleashed beast, you know? My time frame might be wrong on the 4 to 5 years, so don't quote me on that. But
well,
it was,
remember, you know, COVID felt like 5 years.
That's true.
So it could have only been 2. It could have been 7.
It was before COVID, but but you're right. Yeah, and you know, but
BC.
Yeah,
that's our new BC.
That's our new BC. And man, though, it, you know, where it really shows up is again just in the personal life, and you know, I convince myself, because I take medication as well, right? And convince myself, I don't want to be dependent on this. So I don't think I'm really seeing the benefit of it. Stop taking it. And it shows up because you're just not as present, because your mind's just like all over the place.
Yeah.
And so it's taken, and trying to do some, you know, work on myself to go along with that. And I mean, a lot of things I've kind of shared as we go on, just being more intentional in the habits, but it's fundamentals, honestly. And it's okay. It's okay to have, you know.
So there's something I did last year. Speaking of fundamentals, the program was called Optimize. They changed the name recently to Heroic, I think. But it's, you know, the big 3 fundamentals: work, energy, love, and then everything that stems out from there. And like a curriculum, it's like the master classes that we didn't have in school. Like, I'm trying to bring that to accounting now too. I don't know if it was subconscious, but now I'm thinking about it. It's like they had all of these different subsets, and he was pretty against the medication part of it. That's why I thought I could just stop taking it. And, you know, if you exercise and you're intentional about what you eat, and you change a lot of the things that we've become very accustomed to, then you may not need it. But I can't stop eating gluten or bread. I've tried, but it's, you know, it's too good. Pizza's too good. Like, and there's certain things that I just, you know, to me it's almost easier. But I think I have a back of my mind, I realized, like, if we ate like our great ancestors, and if we ate like, you know, like the Romans ate, or the Greek, you know, those diets that they have, the paleo type stuff, maybe we may not need it as much, and maybe we could survive. But, you know, again, it's about balance, and if family's always eating things and you're trying to eat differently, that's hard. There's a lot of things that, you know, you can't fundamentally have a paradigm shift on everything at once. So it's got to come in phases. So that's why I started taking it again. But I think there's you know, there's worse things I personally could be doing than eating carbs, right? Like, it's, you know, you got to pick your battles, you pick your poisons.
Yeah. Well, and again, going back to, you know, priorities, whatever, you know, you can only have so many, and it takes a lot of willpower. Your mind can only do so much, right? And I think that's probably the biggest thing that I've been learning in the last whatever number of years, is just, you know, there are limitations, and, you know, we all have them, and that's okay.
We're fallible humans.
We're fallible humans, and you've got to figure that out. I think the when I show up my best, it's when I know that, and I recognize it, and I'm comfortable admitting my limitations. Whenever I get myself into, you know, uncomfortable situations, or I don't feel great, it's when I'm not being honest with myself, and it just creates challenges, right? And it just doesn't feel good. And it was hard, again, just recognizing that. It's like there's something in me that just doesn't want to admit there's a limit. This is like, it's just my personality, right? It's like, you put a wall in front of me, I'm going to try, okay, I can go over it, I can go under it, I'll go through it. Come on, you know? Like, let's figure out, there's a lot of ways to get through this wall.
I'm powerful, I can do this.
Right? And then you just realize after a while of banging your head into the wall, like, sometimes you can't get through a wall. Like you got to figure out a different route. Like you got to figure out to go around it or something. And so I think it's mindset, having the mindset that there are limitations. You can work with the limitations. Like it's like going with the current, right? I spent a lot of my life probably trying to hold on to the side, like I didn't want to go downriver. I'm just holding on, going against the current, or trying to swim upstream or something. It's like when you're doing it right, it's just everything's easier, Again, and I'm not professing that I've got this all figured out. Like I don't.
Well, we never do. We have some things figured out, and we're always evolving. But Upstream, that's another good book that I read, and the difficulties of going upstream when it's easier to go downstream. So you're saying that sometimes as it could be a bad thing, and you got to fight against yourself to not go against the grain. But sometimes in our profession or in the industry, sometimes you do have to go against the grain to change and to move things forward. That's been the ongoing metaphor of our podcast, as it was Sons of CPAs. It was, this is the next generation of accountants. Same with Accounting High. We are doing a lot of things differently. We're changing the way we think about what's been the same for hundreds of years in accounting. There's a lot of the way we do billing, the way that we price, the way that we form our organizations, right?
One thing I'll say, because realize, even clarifying what I was saying about the going against stream, I think sometimes, I'm talking about going with the current of you yourself, right?
Sure.
Because sometimes you're going upstream because you're actually going with the current of yourself. And I think that is
you're going against what your natural proclivities or
exactly. And that's when it just doesn't, that's when it doesn't feel right. But sometimes, and I do, because like I said, I like going to go through the wall, man. And that's swimming upstream for sure. Because the easiest way to get to the next room is not to go through the wall. But if that's if that's
all
flowing,
you see, that's on your vision. And you have your blinders on, right? Sometimes we get in our own ways too. We don't see the door. It's right next to us because we're not looking.
Yeah. You look at some of the challenges of the profession, we're all looking for great people, and building more people. So there's a talent shortage, and so
crisis.
You're able to put together. You just need more resources in this environment. There's so much. You look at we'll just go down the tax lane, but obviously you could go down any one of the lanes of, advisory services. You just look at how much the pace of change of regulation, of law changes, of form changes, deadline changes, right? You can go, the list goes on, and you need
human capital.
You need human capital, and you need the more people. Someone put it to me this way, and I think it was the best way of summing it up. Anytime you can get more like-minded and smart people together, that's going to be a good thing. Go for it. And that's really what this is. If you're going to boil it down.
Well, it's not because historically it's usually either a people thing or a revenue thing. And the revenue things, when you're acquiring for clients and things like that, doesn't ever really work out, and sometimes the people leave. We had Rita Keller on, and she talked about the different mergers that they had, and it usually failed in the early days because they were just doing it to build their top line with no real purpose or intentionality. It was just, what can we do next? And then they would lose the people, and then they realized the people are the most important part of any of these acquisitions that they were making.
Yeah.
So,
well, I look at it too, because I think, again, you probably have said this earlier, right? But just my mindset now really has focused on how can I want to help the client, but I really want to help the people that I get the opportunity to work with on my team, right?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And how can we advance whatever it is that they want to do and what their vision of their career is, and it just creates more opportunity for them, that maybe they would want to go to be in a different area. No, well, now there's more geographic offices and locations. Maybe they want to focus on something else. Well, now there's an opportunity to do that, or learn from somebody else. I don't know. I think it creates more opportunity
for growth,
for growth of people. And I think that's really been the focus.
The most important part.
Is the most important part, to your point earlier, right? That if you don't, public accounting and accounting in general is pretty hard to do if you don't have people. Going back to that violin, right? You can't. The violin's not going to play itself. You could have the most beautiful violin in the world. Ain't going to sound great if you don't have somebody to play it.
Greatest software,
That's
the
right.
greatest tech stack.
Everything. If you don't have the people, and you don't have the people, again, maybe going with that going with the flow. And again, sometimes that means going against the flow, going upstream and and sharing that, hey, I think this could be better, and this is how I think it. I think it takes everybody being willing to do that for it to be right.
Well, this is like what happened with BotKeeper. Early days it was just, we've got AI doing this, and then it kind of shifted over time, and it's like human assisted AI, and there's people working on this too, and you can't have one without the other. There's to a large degree, this profession has been focused on the technology, the tech stack, the software, and less about the people, and that could be this could be a reaction to that. I think there's a lot of things playing into why we're having such a talent shortage. It could come in waves, and we could end up, going back to the golden days when you put a job ad up and you got hundreds of applicants. It's not happening anymore, especially with the higher level positions, with the client facing positions, with the people that working tax season. We had one of our tax managers quit right at the end of tax season because she wanted to spend more time with her family.
Yeah.
And I wasn't even, she was working 2/3 time, but it's, I think the mental toll that tax season has been taking during and post COVID, I don't know if we're really post, but it's, but all the changes we had to hold on our backs, and what we had to do as professionals. I mean, I'm sure you talked about it a fuck ton on your podcast. Like, that's as humans, I don't think we're capable of handling all of that stuff at once. So that's probably another reason too. And I think partly too, the other reason that we're having such a talent shortage is that it's so much easier for somebody to go out on their own now. Like, they could start up their own little firm, virtual, pick up clients. They could start by doing CAS and taxes, and they don't need to work at the larger firms. So people are more important than ever, especially people that are already established in a firm. So those talent acqui-hires, and and then we might see a trend too of the solo people who started out on their own, and now they don't want to sell and they don't want to interact with all of their clients. So then we'll see some acquisitions of their little practices, not for the revenue, but for them.
Right. I think that's, if there's one piece of advice, and I probably have many pieces of advice. It was like, I don't know why I was going to say, like, if I can give you one thing or one point, like, I can never do that.
We can never do that. We got to do at least three. Everything comes in threes. Yeah.
That's right.
Give me 3 points.
But something that I think that is important is if you got to, again, just being self-aware, going back to that is
self-awareness.
Like, I enjoy being part of the organization that I'm part of, and the path that I'm on is I enjoy having, the resources, right? Because everybody, they bring a skill set, and then you can work with others. Again, but I know for other people that, they want to hang the shingle out and go out on their own. And that's knowing them. So I think if you're doing it because you think somebody told you to do it, or you think you should, or whatever, like, I think that's where the caution area is, right? And make sure you maybe just have the conversations, become educated, listen to your podcast. Is that really what I want to do? And it's okay to not know the answer and take a leap sometimes. Sometimes you got to take a leap. The only way to find out if the pool is cold, is you got to jump in, right? Or at least dip the foot in the water, and maybe before you go jump in.
Oh man, I don't like the cold pools these days.
I've
gone away from cold. You think about this. You move from California to Chicago to experience the contrast of the hot and the cold, and to have the seasons, and to be able to appreciate the sun when it's out.
You're right. I have such a huge appreciation for that, and that is why that's a reason I love living in Chicago. Other than there's a lot of good things to like about Chicago too, but you really can't appreciate the hot without the cold, and vice versa. And so you kind of have to have that. You have to have both to be able to appreciate it,
I was just in Lake Tahoe, and
it
was cold there.
Yeah.
But I got a hotel room that had 2 showers. So I did something crazy. I had put it really cold on one, and I put really hot on the other. And it was so fun. I mean, I don't know, it was fun, but it was like, that was, because you see how people do they do the hot and the cold contrast.
Yeah.
I think, like, when they're training or different things like that, or if it's just like going to like a special spa.
Yeah.
So I tried that out. That was pretty fun. And then, but also the larger metaphor was like being in Lake Tahoe. I'm still in Nevada, but it was cold there. It is over 100 degrees here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's pretty incredible. But You go back to bring it all back to the kids. I don't know. I mean, and that's
bring
probably
it back,
part of it too.
Put
Which
the
is
fun
funny
back.
because I will admit that is, probably in my early years in the profession, I worked for I don't know what level she was at the time, but would often talk about her kids, and I would find myself like, I don't have kids. This is really hard for me to relate to you. So I always promised myself I wouldn't talk about my kids, and here I am talking about my kids. But
You should.
But so just the hot goal that made me think of this, and just again, recognize your limitations and go with it. So my kids love to swim, right?
Yeah.
We've got a pool, the building. The pool's it's cold for me, like it's indoor pool, and so I figured, but like they want me to be in the water. And I'm like, okay, I've got 7-year-olds that they're not gonna be 7 forever. They're not gonna want to have dad, in the pool swimming at some point. So I'm like, I gotta figure it out. So like I got like a shirt so that I could actually not freeze, and I got some gear. I geared up so that I could.
Smart.
I got to credit my wife for this. I mean, honestly, I always say she's
the
works.
backbone.
Oh man, she works way harder than I do. She's great. And it's a partnership, and it's
Shout out to our
fantastic.
wives. My
Yes.
wife does everything at home.
Yeah.
I mean, I've been away for a week. I feel bad about that, but it's. I guess did your wife work too?
She works at home with them.
That's the work.
That is her work.
That's
Yeah.
the work. And I hate that I asked the question like that.
No, but I know
because-
what you mean. Yeah.
Yeah, well, I know you know what I mean, but it's like I got to figure out a better way to ask it because sometimes it gets a bad rep. It's like, well, yeah, of course I work, but then also it's like, no, I don't work. I'm home with the kids. Like it's depending on who you're talking to.
Yeah. Or saying like, do you work outside of the home? I don't know, but
Yeah, we'll
it's
figure it
hard
out.
because I want to make sure that the value. And that's I struggle with the same thing. Like, how do you put the words to it to make sure it conveys that again, like I said, she works way harder than I do, and I have a reputation for working a number of hours and. Because I like what I do, naturally, you're going to go back to it, right? And
Talk about work-life balance for our wives.
Yeah.
Where do they get the balance, right?
Right.
We have to give them the balance to have some fun.
Right.
We got to bring the fun back for them, give them a little vacation too.
Yeah. No, they need space because again, it's and we're
And they
talking
don't want
about
to take it. My wife doesn't
No.
want to take it a lot
Right.
of times.
Right.
It's like she resents herself for doing stuff like that or enjoying herself.
But you have to have it no matter what you do, whether you're working inside the house or outside of the house. You got to. It's that self-awareness and self-care because.
So do you jump in the pool now?
Oh yeah, I do.
All right.
Yeah.
And so you have one of those like wetsuits to
It's
jump in?
kind of like a wet suit shirt.
I like
Yeah,
my kids wear those.
Yeah, I know. Like
I like
that's
that
what I was
for the
like
kids.
for the kids. But my kids are they're always warm. They're just like little. So again, you have them here because actually the kids and family they came along with me here and they're hanging out. Well, they're having a hard time hanging out in the pool because it's it's like 107 or whatever. They got to go out early and get in because it's so hot here,
it's
right?
too hot outside.
But they're just like infernos, man. And so they go in this cold pool and they think it's nothing.
Some of us have this cold-blooded nature. I don't know if it's a mental thing too. Like
It is. There
we
is a
get in
mental
our own
thing.
head.
Yeah,
I'm
yeah.
pretty sure it is because I'm always stuck in my head anyway. And then I will get extra cold, especially if I'm thinking about it, or even if I'm thinking about something else. But depending on my mood, my body temperature will shift too.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that they say like you get the shivers or things like that. Like especially detoxing, getting off of or even like alcohol, does that to a lot of people. Where if they don't drink, they get the shakes and the shivers and all that. Our brains are powerful things.
They are.
Yeah. So bringing the fun back, bringing it back to the kids.
Well, again,
that's great that you balance and you bring them to something like this.
Yeah,
really
it was the first time I've ever done. Well, it was the first time I said that earlier. First time I'd engage and
First time you brought
first
them
time
to
I brought
Vegas.
them to use Vegas and or bring them along for a work trip. But it was like, hey, why not, right? And it's
Well, I can tell you why not because flights are expensive.
there's
as hell.
that too. Yeah, right now it is
It's $1,000 for me to come out here,
Wow.
and I had already committed to coming, but. Yeah. Flights are not cheap these days.
No.
Gas is not cheap. Like that's the one thing that kept me away from taking everybody. I was like, yeah, we should all go to Lake Tahoe. And then I looked at the flights and, maybe since we're going to Mexico, we'll just make sure we hit a lake up there.
Yeah,
So.
yeah. It's all about again. And the same thing with that, right? Like you could take this metaphor out and further, right? About limits and knowing your limitations. Like there isn't an endless amount of resources. Time is finite. You've got
Time
to
is
be
finite.
right, and you've just got to be better at using the resources you have because they are limited and they're scarce. And so, I think if you bring that to work, you bring that to your personal life. Again,
Here's a very important. Keep going.
Yeah, well, I was just going to discount because I don't want to make again, and I've said this or probably already, good, but I want to repeat the point because I sometimes I don't. I don't personally like when I hear people that like, you know, you kind of just pontificate on all these great things that you should do and whatever else. And I'm saying this because it's what I'm focused on.
Sure.
And it's the mindset I'm trying to adopt. But again, I'm not saying I'm nailing it, you know, that this is my aspiration. And if I can every day get a little bit better at it, then that's where it's at. And that's again, thinking about when I do have
the
a
honesty
good day,
is important for the people that know that they're not there. Then they don't just tune you out too. So
I think that's probably why I say it to you, right? Because I don't want to, you know, I'm saying these things and
walk the talk.
But you got to walk the talk, and so I'm admitting that, you know, if you know me and you look at some of the things like, hey, you're not always getting everything done and figuring out. Well, no, I don't. But but I'm trying to get better at owning that. And
well, here's one thing too. It's like time is finite. So let's try and spend less time on things that are pulling our attention away too, just like we said earlier. And that's my point is bringing it back to the phones, the notifications. That's filling up a lot of our time. I know yesterday I was with somebody and then, you know, she was checking her Facebook and she didn't even know how she ended up on it.
Yeah.
And then she said she wasted like 5-10 minutes just doing that and was supposed to be somewhere else, you know? And it's just like we get stuck in there and we don't even realize how much time has passed. I did it yesterday too. I went on LinkedIn and then I ended up on a video that I'm watching and it was 2 minutes long and I was late for the people I was trying to meet. So it does. And actually, I know you and I talked about this the other day when we were chatting about, you know, we at some point early on, you know, you get the iPad and you got YouTube and you put a kid in front of YouTube and man, it's like, it is crazy how much that like just it sucks them in and that you just then it limits their ability to engage and it's like the same thing's happening to us. Like you said, you look up and like where did that 5, 10, 15 minutes go? Yeah. So we have to get better at it ourselves. So this is how the whole digital minimal thing pulls right back into that. Like it was so easy. Those are the pacifiers, right? Stick the kids in front of an iPad and they're quiet and you can get whatever you need to get done.
Sure.
They're not learning anything. They're not present. You're not present because you're doing something else and they're learning from us anyway. They're learning from us on our devices and then they're mimicking that, but also the devices are like crack. I think that's today's cigarettes is social media. I think it comes back to the social media and the way it's engineered. I think we're going to be talking about that like we talk about cigarettes today, where on planes, people used to be smoking and doctors' offices, doctor used to be smoking. Like it's almost a joke now when you see that.
You wouldn't,
like Walt Disney, the pictures of him are always with 2 fingers. He's pointing with 2 fingers and they airbrush the cigarettes out.
Yeah.
And so Disney has a way of pointing now where when you're there, I think the employees will point with 2 fingers, but that's only because it looked like Walt was pointing with 2 fingers and really he had a cigarette in his hand.
Yeah.
So I think that might end up happening with social media, but I had to take the kid and I'm too far gone with my oldest. My daughter is 14. She has an Instagram account. She has, you know, she's on Snapchat and all these other things. Maybe they adapt to it. Maybe kids are handling it better than we think, but honestly, I don't think so.
Yeah.
I mean, I see that she's depressed half the time and usually after she's been on her phone for a little while. And, you know, I try to take the phone away, but I can't because then she resents me for it. And so it's different. But with the younger ones, I can take the iPad away and all of a sudden they become much more creative. And my youngest is the first kid I've had that didn't really grow up with a device around her. She's 4 years old, but she does a lot more with herself. She can do the self-play stuff better than the other two can. My middle, he's always on the Switch. He's always on his Nintendo if he can help it. You know, sometimes he does things, but most of the time it's video games. And then my oldest, she's doing homework or she's on her phone.
Yeah.
You know, we try to get her a guitar, but she doesn't ever really want to do it. She doesn't find the time to do it.
And I think that's the thing that, I don't know, and this is the point that's maybe coming to me right now, thinking about like, because, you know, those are the realities of the world that we have. You know, social media exists and there's all these things that tug on our time. And it's like, gosh, so literally this is the point that I'm thinking, okay, when I go back home, I got to think about the kids. Like, so I got to equip them to know how to have the self-reflection, again, focusing on the daily, you know, habit of just being intentional and like, am I doing the right things. I mean, it's hard for a 7-year-old to put that into,
Well,
you could teach them to reflect on that and say, well, how much time do I want to spend on these things? And let's talk about it. Like, what do you want to do? What are you trying to accomplish?
here's the crisis point I had last year, and this is the beauty and the curse, or the gift and the curse of these devices. My son is teaching himself how to play piano through the iPad.
Yeah. Right. See,
it's
there's
a
benefit. Yeah.
Like, the app is amazing.
It is.
The app is teaching him how to read music, and so I had to bring the iPad back. I took one of the iPads that I took away. I had them all downstairs, like, locked up. I gave one back, and he's got to play the piano 10 minutes a day. That's the micro habit that he has that we've instilled. And sometimes he wants to play outside, but not like we used to when we were kids. We used to just always go outside, and definitely not like our parents used to.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
The kids don't go outside that much anymore because it's not safe. There's too many cars out, or it's too hot, or it's too cold, or there's nobody outside because all the kids are inside now on their devices.
Right. Yeah. No. It's interesting, but again, just having that pause, I guess, and thinking about how things are different, and I don't know.
Yeah. But there's a lot of good to come out of those. There's a lot of good to come out of social media. I've met a lot of people.
Agree.
I've connected with a ton of people that ended up on the podcast, or that I've met and now meeting in real life. So there's got to be a balance between the social media and the social interactions in life, and that's why we're here, right? I'm not here for the conference sessions or anything like that. I'm here for the people that are here. And that's why you said when we first started, we're circling back. This is a good full circle here.
Yeah.
We're here for the people. We're here to connect. You do an acquisition for the people. Mm-hmm. We got to be more intentional with the people in our lives. And, there's only so much time, right? Time is finite. By the time that we realize that, it's not too late because we realized it and we're still here.
That's right. Now what are you going to do with that? I guess that's the,
Yeah. Where do you go with that?
Yeah.
So. Yeah, it's awesome. Thanks for coming on.
It's a pleasure, man. Honestly, I was you did a great job. You kind of, I know you say you meander around, but I think that it just makes it easier to have a conversation, And,
thanks,
and it's kind of it guides through and it just opens things up. So,
well, sometimes for me at least, I get a feeling for certain people, and then especially if I have a first conversation with them and things, they are connecting in a certain way, then you could go deeper and you're going to get a little bit more substance. And you don't have to have an agenda. Like, we definitely didn't need an agenda. I wasn't that nervous. I didn't have anything written down. I didn't even, I tried to go scan through the LinkedIn to see what I could ask. I definitely saw Forvis there, and I was like, I know I recognize that name, but I didn't even connect all the dots.
Sure.
So,
it makes it because there is something to that, and I'll say that oftentimes and I'm sure you do, right, where you have the preparation and the questions and all that, right? There's something to be said for that, but then there's something to be said where you're just truly curious and you don't know all the answers. So I sometimes I don't want to know. I know enough, but if I know too much,
I won't ask the question.
I won't ask the question because I'm leading them too much, and I don't like that. Again, if I listen to podcasts where you listen to somebody that's really, it's like they're trying to push them a certain direction, and it allows the conversation to go where it needs to go, and I think that's why I really enjoyed this conversation.
Cool, yeah. Well, that was the hard thing about early days when I was doing it with the co-hosts, and I was going in one direction, he was going in another, and then the guest is sitting there in the middle, and they don't know how to react. So there was some episodes early days that I've cleared the clog on those. We're starting to get better when I have a co-host. I'm more cognizant of where they want to go, and sometimes I'll follow them. But it's always all about the guest, and it should always be. And I appreciate these one-on-ones are always getting better because I care about what you have to say, and I'm active listening, and so I think I really appreciate you finding the time because not always I can't. It's hard to connect with people in person, and record while you're somewhere else because there's always something going on. There's always something else to do. So I appreciate you finding the time to do that.
Yeah, likewise, man. No, I know. There's something again to the doing it in person too. There's I don't know. You could just
there's a 3D-ness.
There's a 3D-ness to this, Yeah. There you go.
I don't know if that's the I don't know if that's the right thing.
That's a thing, but it sounds good.
It is for this one, yeah. So for the 3D episode, where do I want to send our listeners? You got some social accounts that you care about? That you care about people connecting with you too?
Yeah. You find me on Twitter. Damien Martin CPA. Really original there with the name. LinkedIn, on Instagram. TaxDad on Instagram.
Cool. TaxDad? You got the TaxDad?
I'm the TaxDad.
Oh, wow. That was early days then.
Yeah.
You were early IG. I don't even think I have an IG.
Yeah, and honestly, I haven't done as much with it lately. It was, because in this, again, just going back to all the things I about, like there's like this level of like almost like guilt that like, oh, I'm not keeping up with that. But it's like, well, hey, that's okay though, because you got to, get to go, what's my priority? What am I focused on right now? Maybe someday I'll do more with it. I don't know. It's just.
I'm seriously thinking about having somebody handle my socials for me because it's a drain on me, and I would be a hypocrite if I did go on there and I'm talking all this about socials on this episode.
No.
So.
All right. Well, we'll see what happens there. But I appreciate it.
I am still on the socials though. So I connected with you on the Twitter today. So
yeah.
All right, man. See you.
See you.